you don't care about ecology, then this interview is for you.
Quel taquin, ce Timothy. Ce soir, c'est spécial Very Green Trip d'Anthrax avec l'art anthropocène, la créatrice de l'église de l'euthanasie Chris Corda et notre invité, l'éco-philosophe Timothy Morton, au discours aussi irradiant que la centrale de Fukushima. Il ne peut pas s'empêcher de donner un coup de pied dans la fourmilière. Pour Timothy Morton, la biosphère est queer, la nature raciste et on est cuit. Mais pas de quoi paniquer pour autant, car Tim défend une pensée écologique renversante qui donne la patate. Ce soir, le flibustier anglais qui philosophe à l'oreille de Björk prend la barre de Trax. Ça va tanguer. Pour l'occasion, l'émission se plie en deux et vous propose de passer au vert en 2 épisodes. C'est à New York que le dynamiteur du politiquement correct écolo nous a donné rendez-vous. Alors comme ça, Tim, la fin du monde, c'est que le début?
I think I'm just gonna head back to your place. I'm not really liking it very much over there at Franco's.
Dude, I want you to get to know these guys. That's never gonna happen if you don't put in any effort whatsoever, okay?
I hate it in there. I just want to drink some pop and smoke some weed.
Really, it's not the end of the world, the physical world. It's the end of the idea that human beings, and in particular white guys, are in charge of some kind of world. That's the end of that. It's the end of that world.
Lunch? It's about that time.
Do you have any proof of that?
Well, I guess the main proof would be a thing that scientists call the Anthropocene. I like the very scientific definition of this Anthropocene. It's basically meaning that there's a layer of human-made materials on the top level of Earth's crust that's been forming since about 10,000 BCE and reached a kind of peak or a kind of acceleration in 1945.
Il y a 10 000 ans, l'humanité se sédentarise grâce à l'agriculture et ça commence à partir en sucette pour la Terre. L'homme devient alors une force géologique laissant son empreinte sur la croûte terrestre. Selon un congrès de scientifiques réuni en 2012, la planète bleue entre alors dans une nouvelle ère, l'Anthropocène.
Humans now change the earth and its systems more than all natural processes combined.
There's a layer of human-made materials in Earth's crust. There is not a layer of ant-made materials in Earth's crust. There is not a layer of dinosaur-made materials. Even though the dinosaurs lived for a long time, there is not a layer of dinosaur-like iPhone bits in Earth's crust. That doesn't mean humans are better than dinosaurs. It's just a scientific fact that there's a layer of human-made materials in Earth's crust. Aluminum, weird chicken bones from Kentucky Fried Chicken, radionucleotides, kind of stuff like that.
¿Cuál es el origen, causa y efecto आप देख रहे हैं मेरे चारों तरफ बर्फ ही बर्फ है.
When you read a headline that says something new every day, like 20%, 200,000, you know, this species going extinct, it's just another bunch of shocking facts that you have to assimilate. And it's as if we never ever get used to the reality that way. It's as if we're always trying to anticipate something, but that something's already happening.
Quand l'espoir meurt, l'action commence, clame Extinction Rébellion. Créé en mai 2018 à Londres, le collectif revendique plus de 100 000 militants dans 70 pays. Non violents, adeptes de l'action directe et sans porte-parole officielle, ces activistes ont le soutien de Naomi Klein, l'auteur de No Logo, tandis que le groupe Radiohead leur apporte un soutien financier. Lors de leur première action en octobre 2018, face au palais de Westminster, la Suédoise Greta Thunberg est déjà sur place. Un an plus tard, l'adolescente qui a lancé la grève scolaire pour le climat traverse l'Atlantique en voilier pour sa tournée américaine.
The older generations are failing us, and the political leaders are failing us. But we will be watching and holding them accountable.
It's not their fault, but what I'm scared of is they're going to be seen as these perfect, angelic child beings who, like, can pronounce how evil people are in a kind of fantasy church called the TV or the media, so everyone can feel appropriately guilty and then go back to doing the same old thing the next day. Like, how many Dickens novels did it take to end child labour? None, because grown-ups had to die to do that rather than kids dying in those novels to prove a point.
Next. Crucifixion. Yes, good. Out of the door, line on the left, one cross each. Next. Crucifixion. Yes, good. Out of the door, line on the left, one cross each. Next. Crucifixion. No, freedom.
Religion is scaled to individuals. Religion is about guilt, okay? We know who's guilty. It's the people who work opposite me in my job in Houston. They work in these offices, Exxon, Chevron, Mobil. They knew the global warming was real for maybe over 50, 60 years. We need to go and arrest these people and maybe put them on trial for something like war crime, level of crime. And on the other hand, everyone's responsible because we can understand it, right? You don't have to prove that you're responsible for a situation. You just have to know that you understand it. So, for example, you see a kid running in the street, they're about to get hit by a car. You can understand that's going to happen, so you're responsible to save that kid. You don't have to stand on the sidewalk going, now, did I cause that to happen and should I feel guilty? Even if you do, the kid might die because you're processing this feeling too much and the kid dies anyway. In a way, who cares, even if human beings didn't do it? Maybe dolphins did global warming.
They call him Flipper, Flipper, faster than lightning, no one you see.
But because we can understand it, and because dolphin flippers can't turn off the oil pipes because they can't reach the keyboard properly, maybe we're just responsible for it, you know, and then with varying degrees. So, you know, rich white guys are obviously more responsible than other people for stopping this thing. And you can have a nice kind of modal, you know, like quality. So you can be 10% responsible, 5% responsible, 100% responsible, you know, and that's different from guilty. And one message I'd like to tell people is you're not guilty. You're not guilty. Like, when you start your car, if it's an internal combustion engine, you're not doing anything to harm the planet. You know, you're not guilty, folks. You're not guilty because that's statistically meaningless at a planet scale, right? But billions and billions of those things are making it happen.
The worms are infinitely kind to me. I'm kind to them. In the future, I will either be extinct, or I will have done an evolutionary quantum leap in order to adapt to the dying planet.
Pour mettre en scène l'extinction annoncée de l'espèce humaine, la chorégraphe danoise de 47 ans, Tina Tarbjørn, a créé une installation sur une période de 6 jours où pendant 7 heures, une danseuse partage un espace exigu avec des milliers de verres de farine. Souvent utilisés comme appât ou comme nourriture pour les oiseaux, ces vers sont aussi connus pour leur capacité à manger le polystyrène. Ils ont ainsi une meilleure chance de survie que les hommes face à la catastrophe écologique qui menace notre planète.
La division que nous avons créée entre nature et culture implique une distinction entre l'espèce humaine et toutes les autres espèces, que ce soit en bien ou en mal. Avec cette division, on peut mettre ce qu'on perçoit comme la nature sur un piédestal et la différencier de nous, ou à l'inverse, l'exploiter sans s'en soucier. Pour moi, il n'y a pas de différence. Nous ne formons qu'un seul écosystème et il n'existe pas de séparation entre nous et les autres espèces vivantes.
Pour Tina, l'écocide actuel, la destruction de notre environnement, est une des conséquences de notre totale absence d'empathie pour les autres espèces vivantes. À travers ses chorégraphies, elle appelle donc à se rapprocher le plus possible des bestioles et autres planctons pour renouer avec la nature. Dans le cadre de l'exposition Ou Vert au centre Transpalette à Bourges, Tina est ainsi venue danser avec des algues bioluminescentes. Pour cela, elle a 2 problèmes à résoudre. Ces micro-algues ne vivent que dans l'eau de mer et dorment toute la journée, n'émettant de la lumière que la nuit. Et pour compliquer encore les choses, ces végétaux miniatures ont été acheminés depuis un laboratoire de Los Angeles et sont en plein décalage horaire. Mais après une petite sieste, les voilà prêtes à éblouir leur auditoire sans que ce dernier soit obligé de plonger les pieds dans l'eau glacée.
L'art permet la rencontre. Il permet de faire des expériences tactiles, tangibles, parallèlement au processus et à la philosophie qu'il met en œuvre. Pour moi, l'art offre cette possibilité. Il offre précisément cela, la possibilité de faire se rencontrer 2 entités aussi mal assorties qu'une algue microscopique et un corps humain. L'art permet ça.
Non. Non. Non.
Les premiers artistes à alerter sur l'écocide sont les écoféministes qui stipulent que destruction de l'environnement et oppression des femmes ont la même origine, le patriarcat. Parmi ces pionnières, l'artiste cubaine Ana Mendieta, active dans les années 70 avec son travail Earth Body. Comme elle, l'artiste américaine Mary Beth Edelson utilisait son corps nu pour incarner des divinités néo-païennes, protectrices de la nature. Mais l'une des voix les plus radicales, c'est la franco-californienne Rachel Rosenthal. Dans son spectacle The Others, ses acteurs partageaient la scène avec des chèvres, serpents et singes, tous traités sur un même pied d'égalité, jusqu'aux biographies dans le livret de la pièce donné aux spectateurs.
I am a cosmic body, born of cataclysm and catastrophe.
Aujourd'hui, on a une perception beaucoup plus fluide de la notion de genre. Ça m'ennuie toujours quand l'écologie se concentre sur un genre spécifique, parce que ça procède également de l'opposition. Ça s'inscrit dans une dualité, et pour moi c'est problématique.
Cette année, à Nyon, en Suisse, la 35e édition du Phare, Festival des Arts Vivants, a invité l'artiste portugaise Maria Lúcia Cruz Correia pour sa performance Voice of Nature, The Trial. Elle commence par un procès au cours duquel des avocats spécialisés en droit européen discutent de la possibilité de défendre une rivière ou une forêt devant un tribunal. L'artiste invite ensuite les spectateurs à se salir les mains. Plutôt que d'essayer de trouver des solutions juridiques à la catastrophe planétaire, Maria préfère établir une relation physique et émotionnelle entre la nature et son public.
Une fois, je suis partie à la montagne pendant 10 jours, totalement seule. J'avais organisé plein de conférences cosmiques et j'ai entendu beaucoup de voix. L'une d'elles m'a dit « La nature ne veut pas aller au tribunal ». Je ne peux pas l'expliquer, mais ça paraît logique que seuls les humains aient recours aux tribunaux pour se défendre contre leurs propres actions. La réponse est en nous. Si on ne veut pas détruire la nature, ça ne tient qu'à nous, parce qu'on est la nature.
Originaire d'un petit village de la côte portugaise, Maria Lúcia tourne le dos à sa carrière de graphiste pour mettre sa créativité au service de la planète. En 2016, elle organise une manifestation sur une plage au sud du Portugal pour empêcher le gouvernement de lancer des forages pétroliers. Bingo, le projet est abandonné. En 2012, déjà en Belgique, elle avait planté une douzaine de militants dans un champ face à une société de distribution de fruits issus de l'industrie agroalimentaire. Dis donc, Maria Lúcia, c'est quoi ce truc de s'enterrer?
J'entre dans la terre pour faire corps avec elle. Le silence, la durée et l'osmose permettent de ressentir la chaleur et le lien avec elle, parce qu'on est de la même famille. Déjà enfant, on creuse des trous dans le sable. Et on y entre sans savoir pourquoi, pas vrai?
On se fait un Very Green Trip d'Anthrax avec le philosophe Timothy Morton.
I see my books on the shelf next to funny other books like Philosophy for Dummies in Barnes & Noble right now in the States. Hyperobjects and Humankind are next to a couple of books, and the one I remember is Philosophy for Dummies. And so, yeah, definitely. And I'm a big fan of like second and third-rate philosophers because I'm a second or third-rate philosopher, like Schopenhauer or whatever, or Merleau-Ponty. They're trying to have ideas, they can't quite control them, but that's why they're really interesting, because like, in a way, who wants to be in control? You know, like, I'm Hegel and I'm in control of everything, you know. That's why you suck, dude.
People like me suck.
Auteur d'une douzaine de livres traduits dans près de 10 langues, telle une pop star, Timothy Morton a son tube, Hyperobjet, un essai écrit en 2013. L'Anglais de 51 ans y développe son concept qui a conquis Olafur Eliasson. Lors de la COP21, organisée à Paris en 2015, l'artiste danois dispose sur la place du Panthéon 10 blocs de glace pesant un total de 100 tonnes, l'équivalent de ce qui fond dans le monde chaque centième de seconde. Un an plus tard, Olafur est l'invité du château de Versailles. Parmi les autres fans de l'hyperobjet, Pharrell Williams et Björk.
What I loved about working with Björk, for example, is that from the first moment, we allowed each other to go completely bonkers in email world, just like saying anything at all and free associating. And it was just so lovely to be able to just go nuts.
I care for you, care for you. I care for you, care for you.
Hyperobject is a thing that's so huge, both in space and time, that it's really hard to point to it all at once. It's even hard to point to it using computers and satellites. You can understand it, but you can't quite point to it. And that makes it quite interesting because it's real, but nevertheless you can't quite see it. So climate, for example, it's everywhere. It's the reason we have weather at all, but you can't really point to it because when you point, you see clouds, you point to the sun, but you can't point to climate. Or evolution, you know, you can point to a cat, but you can't point to why the cat exists.
Trous noirs, gisements pétroliers, réchauffement climatique ou polystyrène, les hyperobjets peuvent être fabriqués par l'homme ou pas. Mais dans tous les cas, ils modifient irrémédiablement le destin de l'humanité. En cause leur don d'ubiquité et leur temporalité extra large. Ainsi, le plastique est un hyperobjet avec sa capacité à se disséminer sur la planète et sa durée de vie qui fait passer Jeanne Calment pour une petite joueuse.
Oh, look at that.
Absolutely no doubt that this bird died as a result of that plastic. That is literally a gut full of plastic. It's quite alarming, isn't it?
Oh, that's awful.
I can say, if Lavoisier is right, that there are these atoms and that they never get created or destroyed, then how do they exist? That's my job. I do ontology, I don't do science. Ontology is like, how do things exist, right? Like maybe there's just one thing, maybe it's this big banana and we're all just like shadows of this gigantic banana. I don't know. Again, I'm not a scientist, but I can tell you how this banana would exist. The banana would exist in such a way that it couldn't be pointed to even by itself. Even if the banana went on the Oprah Winfrey Show and did an interview about itself, what it said about itself would be banana interview. It wouldn't be the banana. And if you touch the banana, you have a banana touch. And if you lick the banana, you have a banana lick. You don't have the banana. You can't see it, you can't touch it, but it's real. And actually, that's a much better idea of what real could be, actually. Something more like, you know, you're in the bath and you reach for the soap and you can't quite, grasp it. It's kind of like that, you know. How to find the right kind of feeling so that you can act properly. Because obviously lying on the floor in the fetal position and kind of crying is not going to help the polar bears you were just talking about. So how to get up off the floor, you know, when I hear this word mass extinction, I get very upset, you know, so how to get up off the floor and do something.
Meanwhile, the population exploded and intelligence continued to decline until humanity was incapable of solving even its most basic problems, like garbage, which had been stacked for centuries with no plan whatsoever, leading to the Great Garbage Avalanche of 2505, which would set in motion the events that would change the world forever.
Oh my God, we're caught in the web of fate and there's nothing we can do. Maybe even some slight smile, not exactly, you know, laughing at the situation, that would be terrible, but at least having some sense that we already know that we're stuck in the biosphere, we already know that we're dying, we already know that we go extinct. We already knew this before we knew this knowledge about global warming. So how to remember that we were just acting just fine before we knew this. And now we're just going to include more life forms, you know, and we're going to get over the racism, which is stopping us from being connected to other life forms, actually. And we're going to try to get over the misogyny, which is also preventing us from doing that. And we're going to have more solidarity between humans and non-humans. And it's going to feel a little bit like a kind of funny combination, maybe, of like sort of goth music, but with a slight smile to it, I think. That's my feeling.
Save the Planet, Kill Yourself was the shot heard around the world. It really was. It has legs. I mean, the Church of Euthanasia has legs too, but Save the Planet, Kill Yourself really had legs.
Save the planet! Kill yourself! Save the planet! Kill yourself!
Au début des années 90, Chris Korda fonde à Boston la Church of Euthanasia avec un seul commandement, tu ne procréeras point. Pour restaurer l'équilibre entre humains et non-humains, l'Église promeut la réduction volontaire de la population à travers 4 piliers. Avortement, suicide, sodomie et cannibalisme, mais toujours dans un grand éclat de rire. Accompagné de son acolyte Pasteur Kim et de l'anarchiste Vermine Suprême, révérend Korda va au contact de l'Amérique conservatrice et la confronte sans filet à ses slogans chocs.
During the time of the church's greatest activity, we added another billion people to the Earth's population, approximately. And so, yeah, I think we could call that an epic fail. The right way to look at it is that the Church of Euthanasia was the world's first anti-human religion. There had to be a world's first anti-human religion, and that was us. It's a new thing, and so it's very dramatic and it's very different. And it would have been a shame for something that different and important to be completely ignored. Well, we took care of that. It definitely wasn't ignored. By the time we got done, anti-humanism was no longer a fringe concept.
First, let's meet the founders, Reverend Chris Corder, Pastor Kim, and Vermin X.
Coup de maître de cet agite-propre, le passage de l'église de l'euthanasie au Jerry Springer Show en 97.
Okay, well, I'm transgendered because being transgendered is part of balance, and that's what we're here for, is to balance humans with the other species on the planet. And this female power, okay? Because this woman is a goddess, and what does being a goddess mean? It means to have power over life and death, the power to control life within your body. She can create life, and she should have the power to destroy it too.
If only we could see the stuff that was cut. It was just so amazing. We'd had all these props concealed in our clothing and stuff so that we could even when Jerry wasn't talking to one of us, we'd still be communicating to the camera. So we had signs, we had props, we had many different things that we would pull out to try and change the conversation. He'd never really had such intelligent guests before. I mean, we just completely made a mockery of his efforts to control us, and in the end, he cleared the stage.
À 57 ans, celle qui porte la double casquette de chef de culte et de productrice de musique électronique vient de s'installer temporairement à Berlin pour se concentrer davantage à sa carrière de compositrice. Son nouveau QG, un petit appartement où elle vient d'emménager avec 2 valises et le strict minimum.
More wigs. It's important to have options. Different wigs for different occasions.
Tu nous racontes ton enfance, Chris?
I'd rather not. No, because it's there's things I'd rather not get into. I feel that I had a very unusual childhood and that had good points and bad points. But it's part of what made me who I am, and the less I say about it, probably the better. But it was super extreme. And I'm a super extreme person, so I think there's probably some cause and effect.
Si Chris se ferme, c'est que sa famille lui interdit de l'évoquer sous peine de procès. Élevée à New York dans les années 60, Chris, née Christopher, est la petite nièce de Sir Alexander Korda, magnat du cinéma anglais et producteur du Voleur de Bagdad. Elle est aussi la fille de Michael Korda, romancier et éditeur britannique, devenu dirigeant d'un géant de l'édition américain. À l'adolescence, Chris fuit New York pour Boston, où elle suit des études de musique au prestigieux Berklee College. Guitariste avec des groupes de rock la nuit et développeuse de logiciels le jour, elle mène une vie qui semble toute tracée jusqu'à l'été 91 où, visitant la très queer Provincetown, elle s'assume enfin pleinement en tant que travestie. Un changement de cap radical qui va bouleverser sa vie.
It's fair to say that in 1990 or so, I was really quite stuck. I didn't like my life that much. I felt kind of square, and you know, I just was sort of a workaday person. I got up every morning and I got on the highway and I drove to a job, and I'd always felt uncomfortable with that. I'm not a suburban normal, and I was never going to be a suburban normal. And I felt my decadence and my inner artist struggling to get out. And so this drastic transition that I went through was necessary. It's how I became an artist.
Dans les clubs gays des années 90, Chris découvre la techno et la deep house et décide d'accompagner les discours de l'église d'un pendant musical avec des titres comme Buy More, Sex is Good et bien sûr l'infamous Save the Planet, Kill Yourself.
Why? Do your leaders lie to you? Why? Do so many of you believe these lies?
Entre deux DJ sets, Chris travaille désormais à la production de ses prochains albums grâce à ses propres logiciels open source et à la polyrythmie qu'elle a découvert à Berkeley. En parallèle, elle compte bien donner une seconde vie à sa Church of Euthanasia, alors que l'extinction de l'humanité devient une hypothèse crédible.
Ecosystem is failing.
We've built up a huge amount of pressure, right? We've heated the oceans an enormous amount, and for sure that heat's going to come out and it's going to fuck our shit up unbelievably. The original fully anti-human Church of Euthanasia was mostly about hating people for being such douchebags, but at this point it's too late for that. That's kind of pointless. It's like kicking somebody when they're down. The new post-anti-human Church of Euthanasia is more about feeling sorry for people than hating them.
On tripe dans la biosphère avec le philosophe poil à gratter Timothy Morton.
I'm an English literature professor still. I would never choose to become a philosopher. I feel like that would be very arrogant of me. I've always have a feeling of imposter, you know, like imposter syndrome. Maybe Socrates was telling the truth when he said he was a clown, right? Like an Aaron in Greek. Maybe he wasn't being like, I don't know if you know Columbo, the 70s American detective, who gets the criminal to confess by asking them too many questions, and he basically screws with the head, and they go, oh, all right, I admit it, I did the murder. And this is what people think Socrates is doing, like, I just have one more question, then the guy's head explodes.
La suite, c'est la semaine prochaine d'Anthrax.
Voilà, Bobby génial.